Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the Binge Eating Disorder Association's Weight Stigma Awareness 2015 discussion on transgender challenges, gender identity, binge eating disorder, and weight stigma. Tonight we have some amazing panelists who are going to discuss the intersections of all three of those issues as well as other issues, safety, employment, medical weight bias, and what it's like to come to identify your body as both an enemy and then your friend. Thank you so much for joining us. As an aside, we would like to let you know about an upcoming conversation that will be held on September 28th at 3:30. That's Eastern Time, 12:30 Pacific, hosted by Nita and the TF-Fed, which is Trans Folks Fighting Eating Disorders group. They're inviting you to join them for an important Twitter chat, #TransTeenED, that's TransTeenED, with trans youth and other trans organizers, hosted by folks behind the documentary What I'm Made Of. They will be holding space for the multiple identities their communities claim and discussing trans youth's struggles with accessing gender affirmative care, lack of representation in traditional ED narratives and media, and how healthcare professionals can become better allies and advocates to those communities. They hope that you'll join them, and we hope you will as well. Tonight I'd like to introduce myself as Elizabeth Wesley Cassella. I am the Director of Events and Memberships for BETA. I am also someone who has suffered from binge eating disorder. I speak about weight stigma prevention and eating disorder and try to educate people about the intersectionality of those situations. We are lucky enough to have with us this evening a very talented moderator and friend of mine, Jamie Fivecoat, and at this point I'll be handing off our presentation to Jamie. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. First, I want to say thank you to BETA and for having and hosting this Weight Stigma Week and allowing us the opportunity to present and to speak during this hour. During this hour, as Elizabeth was explaining just a little while ago, we're going to talk about a number of issues where stigma shows up in both the weight stigma arena and in the transgender stigma arena. The first one we're going to talk about tonight is going to be insurance coverage issues, and then personal safety, family relationships, issues with our employers and at employment, and then if we have time left and haven't not run out of our hour, then we'll go into some others wrapped up around health issues and medical providers. So that's going to be it. I'm Jamie Fivecoat. I've really just recently, recently being in the last 2.5 years, that I formally started to transition. But it's since age of 4, I've known that there was something different about me, and then very early in life, for a matter of fact, by the time I was in 4th grade, I was in my first diet. So that just started a whole process of dealing with weight issues from that point on in my life. So essentially for my whole life, I've been dealing with weight and with stigma wrapped up around both of these issues. For those of us like myself that have been affected by obesity, it varies a whole lot of how that stigma has been manifesting itself. For me, it was some bullying at early ages. I learned how to cope with it later on in life, and then I sought treatment much later in life. On the gender side, it became a huge, huge secret for me, and so it was buried deep inside of me, and I didn't really start dealing with it and let the world know who I was until 2.5 years ago. In my life, I'm on the board of the Obesity Action Coalition, and that's where I get all my stigma training. And I also do work with Smart Recovery, which deals with addictions and ineffective behaviors. And essentially, I'm a healthcare advocate. So, I think that's enough about me, and so I'm going to pass this on now to Faith. And Faith, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm Faith Bryan. I live in Long Beach, California. Much like Jamie, I mean, almost identical. Our stories parallel so very, very closely, Jamie. I knew at age 4 as well that I was not like the other boys. And coming from a very conservative Southern Baptist, conservative Republican background, you can see where my impetus was for closeting myself throughout much of my life. Like Jamie, I waited until age 59, which was 3 years ago, for me, before I decided that it was time to be my authentic self. I was in a relatively happy 16-year marriage to a woman who is still my best friend. But weight has always been an issue from the time I was a small child, shopping for clothes in the Husky section, of course, to the cruel nicknames of junior high and high school, the lonely nights of no dates during college. Excuse me, and a number of other things that a lot of folks that have weight issues deal with. One of the things that always held me back from transition, as well as my family, was the cultural stigma of what a female person should look like. And I'm 6'5" tall, and at one point in my life weighed 450 pounds. So not exactly your prototypical high fashion model. And so I always kind of hid behind that fat and behind that cushion to kind of cushion myself from the weight, from the transgender part of my existence. Finally, at a point, like I said, at nearly 59 years of age, I decided enough was enough. It was time to be authentic. Weight be damned. Spurred on by a heart attack, I did lose a lot of weight by just approaching nourishment instead of food and not taking comfort. These days, I am a passionate advocate for equality. I am a member of the Orange County, Long Beach, Palm Springs Steering Committee of the Human Rights Campaign, and I'm very passionate about that. I'm also very passionate about helping people find their authenticity, despite whatever stigmas that they've lived with their lives, whether it be height, weight. As you can tell, my voice isn't exactly a lilting female voice. A lot of things that stigmatize us as transgender people. And I'm very passionate about helping people realize that there really is no normal. We need to redefine normal. We need to transform normal, and make people realize that we're all humans. It really doesn't matter what we look like or how we dress. So anyway, that's me. I am a retired, semi-retired college professor with almost a PhD. I kind of have not a FUD, I'm ABD. So, but I'm very proud to be here amongst this very illustrious group of ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Faith. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
That would be great. Thanks so much for getting me warmed up there, Faith. My name is Chris. I am a 26-year-old transgender man living in Cleveland at the moment. I have been medically transitioning for about 6 months now, and I'm also 10 months into recovery from binge eating disorder. So the overlap of those things was not accidental. It was really a upheaval of my whole existence. After 10 years ago coming out the first time as trans, then really hiding all those feelings and burying them down as deep as I could, and compensating for that burying by both trying to gain control over my life through restricting my food and engaging in ridiculous amounts of exercise, which my body rebelled against through binging. So that vicious cycle was my whole existence for probably 10 to 15 years. So, and I guess the reason that I'm here now is so I can head toward a goal of being the person that I needed 10 years ago to other people. Now that I've been through that, and possibly by being visible and being a part of both of those communities and where they intersect, then hopefully I can help other young trans people figure out the difference and the similarities between things they might be going through, and that there's a way to figure it all out. So that's my story, and Ivy's next.
Hello, can y'all hear me? I think so, because I see little green dots on the side. Hi, my name is Ivy. I am genderqueer and use gender-neutral pronouns. I am the co-founder and program director of a little group called Gender Benders in upstate South Carolina. We started with 3 folks and have grown to be a group of almost 400 people over the last 4 years, which makes us, I'm pretty sure, South Carolina's largest trans support and advocacy group. So that's largely what my work has focused around for the last 4 years or so. I've done some other LGBT advocacy work, but also hold, very radically body positive view on life, especially in terms of weight and weight stigma. It's something that I've struggled with personally pretty much my whole life too. So I'm excited to be here and be co-presenting with all of these fabulous folks, and hope that y'all get something great out of our conversation this evening.
Thank you, Ivy, and Chris, and Faith, and Elizabeth. I am looking forward to now diving into our conversation. So the format of tonight's webinar is to be an open format. It's going to be an open discussion between the 5 of us, each of us sharing our experiences within these various areas of concern that we may have when it comes to stigma. We thought that we would start off with insurance coverage issues, because most of us, in one way or another, and in many ways on both the weight stigma side and on the transgender side, have experienced issues with dealing with insurance. Now, for those who, I for one have been affected by obesity most of my life, and I sought treatment in a way that utilized surgical interventions. And at the time that we did that, the company that I worked for did cover doing the bariatric surgery, the weight loss surgery that I had back in 2003. The problem was we had very specific language in our plan on how we were to cover it, and the insurance companies decided to make up a whole new set of rules and hoops that we had to jump through in order to seek the treatment that we needed to have. They didn't believe in that particular treatment for some reason or another. Luckily, I'm in the benefits department and have been for the last 24 years. And so I just went to my cohort next door to me and I said, we've got a problem here, and they're not administering our plan the way that we need to. But for most of us who have experienced these things on the weight side, they're not in that benefits department. They couldn't go next door and just get things fixed the way they were supposed to be done based on what their plans do. So why don't we start off there on the weight side of it, because on the gender side, they just flat out didn't pay for mine and for the treatments that I received there. But so let's start off on that. What have the others experienced along that? Chris, did you have anything on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. So for me personally, I experienced quite a bit of frustration on the eating disorder side, and I'm going to touch on that first just because it happened first chronologically for me, so it's what jumps in to my mind initially. For that particular treatment, there was some coverage involved, but it of course applied to my deductible, which isn't really coverage anyway because you're still paying money. And as a young person still figuring this stuff out, that to me seems ridiculous, but that just might be me learning how things work. But there was some coverage involved, but at the end of it, I was unable to have any coverage whatsoever for what I think of as like the second stage of my recovery. So I was all outpatient, and initially I was spending 10 hours a week over the course of 3 days in intensive sessions, and then that stepped down to once a week. And the once a week sessions were completely not covered at all because I guess they thought I should be fine by then. And so I was paying $100 a week just to be able to remember why I'm allowed to eat a sandwich, and for people that's common sense for, maybe it's hard for them to understand why someone like me might need that second step of care and that second part of recovery, but I can't imagine what it would have been like if I didn't have some kind of payment system in place. I was able to work something out with credit cards and all that, but I just now have finished paying off what became the most important thing I ever did in my life. So there's that on that end. And then as far as trans stuff, at this point, the insurance that I have has a blanket statement against all transgender procedures, which is kind of adorable because they're paying for my hormones and they don't even know it, because testosterone can be prescribed for different things, so they have no idea. So that's good. So don't listen to insurance coverage. Yeah. But as far as surgery goes, we all know that we all just make our own Kickstarter pages and everybody gives everybody else $100 across the internet. And it's sad that it's at the point where it has to be this kind of grassroots effort to be able to not be miserable every day. And I know some companies are starting to turn things over, and some states even are starting to do something about it. So it's promising, but I think it's going to be a while before we get an overall change of opinion that people understand this isn't just, I feel like I need to get a different nose. It's like looking in the mirror fundamentally shatters our perception of our existence, and that's not okay. That's all I got.
Thank you. What you are bringing up is common in both both types of treatment. But I guess I probably did misstate. My insurance company is paying for my hormones also, but they know it because I went in and told everybody, hey, guess what? We are paying for the hormones, and so everybody just shrugged their shoulders and said, okay, no problem. But is there a standard, and Elizabeth, maybe you could help us with this, is there a standard protocol of treatments in BED that struggles with the insurance side of it?
Well, actually, all eating disorders have the problem with insurance that you've been discussing, especially your narrative, Chris. The treatment facilities struggle every single day talking to the people that need to approve someone's stay with regard to the statistics and metrics that the insurance company is using versus what actual improved mental health care is. And make no mistake, eating disorders are a mental health issue. They're actually the highest statistical mortality rate mental health issue. Predominantly suicide taking the most lives, but this includes everything from organ failure on down the line. BED being the most recently recognized by the APA's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, we have very low numbers as to how many people are actually dealing with BED, but we believe that we are 3 times the number of bulimia and anorexia combined. So that puts us upward of 30 million people nationally. It's like saying twice the size of the state of Illinois. When people need to go in for eating disorders treatment and they're denied by their insurance company, some of the arguments that have been proposed previously is that, you know, we need this to be covered with parity as one would cover a mental health illness like schizophrenia. The Parity Acts have had some limited success. However, recently we've had the Anna Weston Act, which is now turning into Anna's Law, I believe. It's getting great bipartisan support, and we're hoping to extend the requirements of the insurance companies for what they need to do for people with eating disorders, and create more of a safe space for people to get the treatment that they need, both inpatient and outpatient treatment. So when, you know, Chris talks about having had partial coverage but needing more treatment, that a person is actually evaluated on the duration of time that it will take for them to have a healthy relationship with food and in their bodies, not just be reduced to what is your BMI and have you put on enough weight in enough time, because that's quite often the metric that insurance companies will use in order to shorten someone's stay in a treatment center or deny them privileges to be seen by someone who's certified to actually treat them.
You know, and I think when it comes to the treatment of all types of weight issues, that we see at the very extreme, such as somebody like me, that we can get surgery paid for. But for the rest of the stuff that goes on, the psychological coverage that's wrapped up around it, the educational coverages that are wrapped up around it, either don't exist, don't get paid for at all, but or very, very limited durations in the number of visits you're allowed to have for a counselor on an annual basis. And so that is going to be that is a struggle, and it's a struggle on both sides. On the gender side and transgender side, most companies, Chris, just like yours, most companies in the United States right now have exclusions and just plain will not cover it. And that is changing. For a matter of fact, Faith, the work that you all can do with the HRC, that is helping especially the Fortune 500 companies start adding the gender and transgender coverage into their plans. And I'm very, very glad to start seeing that. I'm fighting like crazy to try to get it paid for myself. So it's coming up on 8/23. So we've been doing pretty good with this. So, but before I do, Faith, Ivy, did you all have anything that you would like to talk about around the insurance coverage?
Actually, I would love to pipe in here from the standpoint of the. I had surgery. Golly, this is back before bariatric surgery was the fashion, so to speak, or was the popular choice. I had the what they called the vertical banded gastroplasty, or the old stomach staple. Okay, and this was 1992. And at that time, there were not that many people actually performing that kind of surgery. And I had a surgeon who actually studied with the doctors who had perfected the surgery at the University of Iowa back in the late 80s. And he was very well versed. But once surgery was performed, there was no follow-up at that time. There was no way that they addressed, insurance-wise or even medically, the follow-up that we needed, and without realizing that surgery is only half the issue. It's how you approach your attitude towards food and how you're using food, whether it be to comfort or to hide or to you come home and you're in a bad mood and you go in and you fix a big hero sandwich and and whatever and learning how to manage nourishment rather than eating as a pleasurable activity. There was none of that. So I would say my surgery was a total failure. It did absolutely nothing except give me a scar down my belly. I lost 100 pounds. I gained 150 back. So it is important that we make sure that, unlike much like we do with what we're hoping for among the transgender community, is that these insurance companies realize that it doesn't stop with surgery. That there is follow-up. That there must be education, and there must be some I don't want to use the word reprogramming, but honestly it is almost that in reprogramming how you view not only food but how you view yourself and how you use that. So I'm very fortunate to be involved with HRC. Thank you for pointing it out, Elizabeth and Jamie both. I think it's important that on the transgender side of things, we're starting to see, now I live in a very liberal state of California, to see more and more of at least the state-funded insurances stepping up to fund transgender surgeries. I know Medi-Cal, the state-funded insurance here in California, funds it. There is a catch-22. None of the surgeons take it. So, I mean, we can pay that. They'll pay for it if they can get somebody to take what they're paying. But it's always going to be less than what the surgeon wants. So there's going to be a discrepancy. There's always going to be some kind of a copay, and I am lucky that because I am retired and I only work very part-time. I fall below the. I never thought I would ever say that I'm lucky to be poor, but I am, because Medi-Cal pays for all of my hormones, and including the finasteride that I'm using to help grow some hair so I can get rid of this hot wig. So there's starting to be progress. We're starting to see, I understand from the folks that I know in the insurance industry that it all kind of trickles down from Medicare. And now that Medicare has recognized within the last year or so that surgery for transgender individuals is a necessity, and they're starting to work towards covering that, it shouldn't be long before we see the insurance companies start to embrace those as well, although they can always find some loopholes, I'm sure. So I think the idea that we just need to take care of ourselves, and our insurance companies need to be our friend, not our enemy. And that's kind of, we've kind of had this love-hate relationship with insurance over the years. And I hate to pay the premiums, they hate to pay the claims, but we love having insurance. So we've got to get that to be a love thing, so that everybody's getting the care that they need, not just beyond the cosmetic care, but the real deep down care. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you very much. The next subject that we want to dive into is one around personal safety. And I have to be very honest, and from the transgender side, I haven't experienced any real issues with personal safety other than what was in my head, that my own fears and my own expectations of what would happen if somebody actually knew the real me. But on the weight side, when I was young and when I was a kid, there were issues. The only real fight that I can never remember being in a schoolyard was because I was the fat boy, and back in those days I was, and got picked on and ended up in a bad fight. So it is out there, and I know particularly on the trans side, there's huge issues when it comes to personal safety. The transgender community sees an extremely high number of murders. extremely high number of attacks, and for those of us who have not experienced, we're definitely very fortunate. So I'd like to open it up to the panel to hear what you all and how you feel about personal safety as you move through the two worlds that we move in.
Well,
I could
I
go.
don't want to lead the conversation here, but I would like to speak to. Sorry, Chris, we jumped in at the same time. My issues with disability, and I kind of, my roommate is also transgender, and she's been out for 10 years. She's absolutely passable. Really lives stealth 99% of the time. Yet she's not as self-confident as I seem to be to do the things that I do. I go to the grocery store, I do my banking in person, I'm not afraid to go anywhere. I work at Target. I stand in a cash register 4.5 hours, about 4 to 5 days a week, helping customers. I'm very visible, and I think visibility is an important issue. The more they see us, the less afraid that people will be, and the more they realize that we're just people. We're not something to be feared. We're not something to be hated. For my own part, I'm fortunate in one ways. I spoke earlier about being big, but I'm 6'4", and I do still weigh over 300 pounds, and so I don't present an easy target. But I know my roommate's 5'7" and weighs about 150 pounds. And is a target. And I know other trans women who are in the same boat as I. And it's frightening. It's frightening to hear and to see the attitude of some people in our society that want to vilify us and hurt us. It's scary. I used to play in a pool league here in Long Beach, and the pool halls are all down in a kind of a dark part of town, and I know some nights I had to park 4, 5, 6 blocks away from our venue, and I mentioned to somebody that it bothered me a little bit to have to walk 4, 5, 6 blocks back to my car at night in the dark, and they pointed out to me, they said, Faith, you're 6'4", you weigh over 300 pounds, and you're carrying a pool cue. I think you're be okay. And I had to laugh and agree that there is a certain safety in being my size. There's also a certain danger in being my size, in that all of my life people have challenged me because you want to be that person that knocks off the big gun, that wants to kick down the person that seems to have all the power. And yeah, I've dealt with that all through my life as well as you, Jamie. The name calling, the people wanting to prove themselves against the big person. So it is an issue. It is something that we need to change. And I'm of a mind that it's all about visibility. It's being authentic and being out in the world. And as I said before, transforming what people think is normal. And if we can accomplish that, it's going to bring our safety level up. It's going to bring our self-esteem level up. It's going to bring every possible positive thing you can think of to our community and to us as individuals. So back to you.
Hey, Chris, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, what I was going to chime in about is that I definitely have lucked out in the safety department, just that there's a wide disparity between trans feminine and trans masculine communities. Just that trans masculine people, we just tend to pass better for whatever reason, and that certainly isn't something I take lightly. And as part of that, I agree with the importance of being visible and in and of my own ability to be safer in doing that. I think that may be something that us trans masculine folks need to think about, as seductive as it is to think about being completely stealth. I think if you feel safe enough to be in the position, then we owe it to each other to look out for one another as a community. That being said, the concept of passing is so problematic. It's of course critical to just being able to survive, especially in the earlier days of the trans movement. If you didn't pass, then there were deadly consequences, and there still are to this day. It's absolutely not something that's been solved. But especially as more gender nonconforming or non-binary people step out into the open, hopefully we can move toward a place where passing isn't necessary. Other than the extent of if it makes you feel good, fine, do that. But it becomes a problem when you're doing things to conform to your new perceived gender, even if that gender in of itself doesn't fit you, because then you're still not being yourself, even if you're passing. That being said, as far as weight bias for that, I particularly have an issue with my own eating disorder treatment was certainly complicated by the intersection between, am I having body image issues right now, or am I having dysphoria issues? And the hardest place for that for me was like my hips in particular, because on one side, it doesn't feel right that my body is that shape, but on the other side, it's terrifying sometimes that my body is that shape, because if anything's going to give me away, it's that part of me. And at some point you just have to realize that is the width of my skeleton, and that's how it's going to be. And so I think it's important to dissect those two issues apart in your own brain, and not that it will help with any of the onslaught of negativity when you step out the door, but it's a complication that I think gets forgotten sometimes in body image discussions, and it's important.
It is. Thank you, Chris. Ivy, do you have anything to add to this particular discussion, or do you want to pass on this?
Maybe, yeah, sure. I'll give it a go. So I really appreciate some of the stuff that Chris was talking about passing, and I really hate that terminology because it implies that like I'm passing as something that I'm not. Like I've made an effort myself to refrain from using that word, which was a part of my vocabulary until I expanded that vocabulary, and now I try to say things more like read as masculine or read as feminine. But so that's just a piece of that. But I think that anytime that we're talking about safety when it comes to trans identities, we have to talk about trans women of color. Just me, I'm white, I'm middle class, I'm read as a masculine person the majority of the time, and there's certain safety that comes with that in moving through public spaces. That's definitely different for trans women, and then especially for trans women of color. And then when we look at trans women of color who are also living below the poverty line, gosh, you're just getting hit from all sides. So I don't know, I just think that that's important to talk about when we have conversations about personal safety and trans identities.
You are so right on that. And another one of the other themes that we seem to have been hearing amongst all of us here is the fact that deep inside of us, at least us older girls, deep inside of us for a long time was this deep fear. And so regardless of what that safety how real it was for us, deep inside it was as real as could be, that nobody in the world could know who we are. And go ahead and just unmute, Elizabeth.
I don't want to step on this conversation because it's excellent, but I also want to just bring in the small piece, somewhat safety, somewhat protections. Back to the weight stigma and size discrimination piece. Violence is visited on people regularly due to their size. It is incredibly prevalent in our society to find it funny to not only make fun of, beat up, marginalize the fat person. That's extraordinarily accepted, from television humor to personal humor to cultural. Um, it's just part of what a lot of people have been taught, hopefully less and less as we're doing the work that we're doing. But to extend that a little bit further, when we talk about protections, we also need to talk about discrimination protections and employment protections. And just a quick bit about that is that we, as a society, only have 5 cities where people of size are protected from being fired or demoted or losing their job due to their size. 5 cities out of our entire country is a ridiculously low amount of places where we have laws protecting people who can be marginalized, have violence visited upon them, lose their jobs, be told that they aren't appropriate in appearance, not just as a fashion slam, but actually losing their livelihood. So I just wanted to bring that piece into it because I feel as though the discussion about safety is completely different. However, it's all enmeshed in one way or another because we are vulnerable when we don't protect one another, when we don't create laws that protect ourselves, when we don't support people by standing up and saying treating any culture due to a perceived difference isn't right. We've made a lot of progress in different areas, let's say discrimination in gender, discrimination in religion, and discrimination in race. We're not necessarily making those strides as fast when it comes to body size because there is this unrealistic equivalent between body size, health, and personal responsibility. The people who are in larger bodies are seen as being less responsible for themselves and somehow earning demoralizing behavior. So I just want to kind of throw that out there too to be part of the mix because I know that we're talking about so many intersections here. I can see that being very onerous upon anyone who is dealing with more than just one issue within this conversation.
Yeah, and that what I would say to that, especially about just the perceived lower worth based on body size, that particularly impacted me as a person who struggles with perfectionism, and it's how it feeling that I had to control my external appearance in a way that would present myself as being valuable, or else everyone would abandon me. I don't know. I don't know what I thought would happen, but it goes so far in the other direction, even that people who push themselves hard enough to fall into so-called acceptable body range sizes, as someone who accomplished that, it has never been more true to me that being completely in control and being able to crush down all of your body's defense mechanisms against starvation is not equivalent to being responsible or being smart or being powerful. It is the exact opposite of all of those things. Because yeah, maybe everyone thought I looked really good, but I was extremely sick, and if they wanted to go out and get a sandwich, I would have to say no. There was no life left after all of that. And now what I've come to accept is genetically my body can look like that, but it will take a year of beating myself down into the dirt. And is it worth it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And for the vast majority of people, their body type is such that they are not going to look how whatever amount of diet or exercise ads tells them they are capable of looking if they just try. Because trying for one person might be go for a walk every day, and trying for another person might be just complete obliteration. And regardless of if you go for a walk or not, you still have the same value. Regardless of what you decide to have for a snack, you still have the same value. And none of it should have any input on your employment situation. which is astronomical, utterly.
Well said, Chris. The as we're moving on here, I would kind of like to at least get into one more subject matter, and that is of family and relationship issues. And actually, safety is a good place to transition into that from the standpoint that there are a lot of people in both communities that experience safety issues at home, relationship issues at home, because of weight bias issues or because of transgender issues. I have a really positive story from the transgender side that's mine. So I'm going to kind of hold off on that and let some of the others talk on it for a bit. Ooh, something just happened weird on my screen. Is everybody else seeing that? Anyway, okay, good. Now, and also before we move in and start talking about family and relationship issues, for those people who are listening in on the subject, I believe there's some sort of a chat system, and that Elizabeth can see it. And so, if you have some questions and you'd like to pass them on, please feel free to do so, and we'll try to funnel those through into the mix. So, when it comes to family issues, how is it working for everybody, both on the trans side and on the weight side? Chris, you're shaking your head. Oh.
Can I jump in on this one to start here? I do have a story that I think is very much to the point here. I remember always, I mean, I was always a big person. I was always heavy, I was always overweight, and I had a difficult time dating in high school, in college. You know, it's amazing. I still find it amazing that I was married 3 times. So, but there were actually 3 women who agreed to marry me at some point. But the story that I want to tell is about wife number 3, which was my most successful marriage. It lasted 16 years. But when we first started dating, my ex-wife was a health nut. She walked every day. She exercised. She ate, low fat, and was very, very health conscious, very diet conscious, very body image conscious. And we met on a blind date through the newspaper, through an ad in the paper. And so we meet, we go for a walk, and she finds that she likes me. She likes my personality. She likes my sense of humor and everything. But she's really struggling with the body image thing, right? So she's not really opening up. She's not really relaxing. She's not giving me a chance. Well, she goes off for about a 10-day vacation with her best friend up to Montana. She and her husband were building a cabin at the time. She went up there and helped them build their cabin. And while she was there, her best friend and her best friend's sister kind of cornered her one day and told her basically, hey, if you like this person, get over the weight thing. Give them a chance. If you feel good about their heart, if you feel good about their soul, don't get caught up in the body image part. So she comes back from the vacation, and about a week later, nature takes its course, and we wind up in an intimate situation. Let's just put it that way, okay? And she hates when I tell this story, but it is so perfect for this. We finished. God, this is embarrassing. She's laying there with her head on my shoulder, and she looks up at me and she goes, "Wow, that wasn't as disgusting as I thought it was going to be." Swear to God, her exact words. I tell that story, and people will go, "And you still married her?" Well, of course I did. I loved her, and I understood, because I had it in my head that it was probably disgusting anyway, too. You know what I mean? My own self-esteem, my own self-image, my self-confidence was at such a low point that I was just grateful that she was even talking to me at that point. And as we continued down the road towards our marriage and our relationship, even today, she's learned an awful lot about weight and how people use it to mask their emotions. She's done a lot of homework the last 3 years to learn about what it means to be transgender, and I think she finally understands the connection that I had between the two. That part of my weight stigma came from being a closeted trans person and not understanding who I was and what it took for me to be authentic. So I wanted to share that story because I think it is rather indicative of a mindset in our society, like you said, that if you're heavy, if you're overweight, if you have an eating problem, it's not really a mental issue. It's just laziness or low self-esteem or bad image of yourself. And honestly, it's I spent 2 years in therapy figuring out that food is not my best friend. It is my nourishment and my sustenance. And there's other things in my life that need to be embraced more than eating. So that's my story.
Faith, I think, my own personal story parallels yours in a lot of ways. As I think it does with a lot of trans people, I think growing up in a society that, even children's show, every movie, every joke, there's so many transphobic just subplots everywhere. Oh, a man in a dress, which is false and inaccurate and upsetting in so many ways. And I think when, from an early age, oh God, that's me, then you grow up thinking, well, I'm wrong then. And, the internalization of that, and then if on top of that you have an internalized issue with body image and weight, then where do you end up? And, for me personally, the coming from both angles, being brought up in a family that was extremely fat phobic and extremely rigorous about diet and black and white thinking about what it means if you are a fat person, and we cannot be one of those people. Both of those ended up being that I was in a series of abusive and problematic relationships, and not only did those relationships reinforce the idea that something was wrong with me because of the emotional abuse that I suffered, but they also kept pushing my identity deeper because I thought, well, if I express myself now, then they'll leave, and then I'll really have nobody. So I think one of the most important things anybody can do, either when you're in the trans community or in the weight stigma community, is just figuring out how to take care of yourself first. And, having been single for the last, 8 months or so has been probably one of the best things I've ever done, because then you can really figure stuff out. So take the time to do it.
Thank you for sharing. Because I know with a lot of folks, and there's been an awful lot of, well, Faith, you said you've been divorced 3 times now, but to what, yeah, everybody else can't see the what's going on with the other folks, but did you feel your gender issues came into play with those breakups, or was it other things that didn't work?
Eventually, I know in the case of my last 2 marriages, the gender issue was a problem. My second wife, I basically came out to her at some point and told her that I thought maybe I was at that point, this is the late 80s, early 90s, thought I was a cross-dresser at that point. I had no information. The internet's a wonderful place for learning about who you are and getting the information to kind of put 2 and 2 together. I had so many symptoms, quote unquote, so many signs that had I had the knowledge 20, 30, 40, even 40 years ago, life might have been different for me. But I didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand all through I got to the point where I was 16, 17 years old, and I just said, I'm getting so big, I can't really fit into mom's clothes anymore, and I really don't have, my sister wasn't old enough. She was 10 years younger. So, it really wasn't something I could do. I'll just shove that into the background, and I was unhappy, but I didn't know why. And it took years and years and years for that to finally come out. And it really wasn't until the 90s when I met wife number 3. We started dating. I started seeing more and more transgender people in real life. Met a few people, started making some friends in the community. And then it was like a bolt of lightning. Oh my goodness, 2 and 2 equals 4. I get it. I get this. And then there was a struggle for about maybe 5 years in dealing with the fact that I knew that I was trans and that I knew that I needed to come out, but was still afraid. I love this woman. I still do. I think she's a wonderful person, and she still loves me. But the fact being that it just was not conducive to our continued relationship. So yeah, the trans issue really was what ended number 3.
So it really that is a struggle, and now I'm very, very fortunate. I'm going to be right up front. My wife Karen and I have been married for 41 years, and so back in the early 70s, when we first started getting together, we knew there was something a little strange about me, but that was our little secret. And but we've moved through it, and as I've changed and as she's changed, and we've both had different things about us that have changed, both on the weight issues and on my transgender issues. It's still a struggle. And it's had a very positive ending, and we love each other deeply, and it's very. But I always need to be reminded that this is just as hard on her as it is on me, and from a physical standpoint and from an emotional standpoint, it's even harder on her than it is on me. And so there's lots of family and relationship issues that we all struggled with. Parents, and there again, I was fortunate with it, and but so many folks actually lose their families, and it's rough. It's rough. So we are getting close here to the end of our hour, and Elizabeth, have we had any kind of questions or anything that have come through that we need to address?
No, and that's not to say that we might not have some follow-up. I would be surprised if we at BETA don't receive some questions trying to reach out to each of you, specifically because you each spoke so eloquently and so meaningfully. I would really like to thank each one of you. And I'm sorry. Can you all hear me? Okay. I would like to thank you. That's one of the reasons why I'm glad you can hear me. And I know that Ivy has some resources that she'd like to share. So I'm just going to make this very quick and say that it is with an enormous amount of gratitude that I and that BETA have been able to work with each and every one of you, Faith, Ivy, Jamie, Christopher. This has been several months in the making, and the blog posts that you gave us, the TED Talk that you shared, and this evening that you've shared not only with me but with all of our communities. I would just like to say on everybody's behalf that I am so thankful. I've learned a lot. I hope that our other viewers have too, and that you will all continue to work with me and work with BETA to keep these conversations moving forward, possibly in our forums or in the BETA Hive in various groups, or just writing for us. But again, it's just been an honor and a really amazing time. Ivy, why don't you close us out and tell us what we need to know?
It has definitely been great to be connected with y'all and get together for this. So there were just a couple of things that came up that I have resources on that I just wanted to mention real quick. So near the beginning of our conversation, we talked about insurance coverage and funding transition, and I compiled a 27-page resource guide on how to fund transition. There's information in there about employers that offer trans-inclusive insurance and crowdfunding and a lot of things that I think are really helpful about that a lot of folks in our group have found helpful. So you can find that on lgbtrightstoolkit.org, or I think Lisbeth might also have that available somewhere with BETA at some point in time. So hopefully if you need that, you can get connected with that. We also touched on some family issues, and my partner started a partner support group for trans folks. So if that's something that anybody who's listening needs, you can get connected with us through the Gender Benders Facebook page, and I'll be happy to connect you there. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, thank you so much for pulling all this together.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Wishing you all sweet dreams, and we will hopefully talk to you all soon.
Okay, thanks. Good night.
Thank you for having me.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.